Welcome to the Wilderness Season podcast. I'm your host, Sherry Ward. I have a passion to bring hope and breakthrough to those experiencing the toughest times of their lives. In this podcast, we will give you critical insights and revelations as I interview people just like you, those who have been right where you are and understand exactly what a wilderness season is all about. It's real, it's raw, it's practical. Come join the conversation. Welcome to the Wilderness Season podcast. This is the Wilderness Season podcast that we're now going live for the very first time on Facebook. Yay! So in the comments, as Scott's sharing, we're making this podcast more interactive. So as Scott is sharing, if you have some questions, go ahead and put it in the comments. Again, give us a shout out. Let us know where you're from. We'd love to know what state, what country. We now have 17 countries, pretty wild, that are now listening to the Wilderness Season podcast. So there's lots of people in the world that are really going through it. And we want to bring hope and healing to everybody out there that's really going through it. So Scott, I am just thrilled that you're here. The minute that I met you, I just knew in my heart, I'm like, this guy gets it. You know, I just have this weird thing about somebody and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's been in the wilderness and he gets it.
Yes.
So
Yes, very
I
much
would
so.
love for you to tell your story, pick up wherever you want. Maybe like what landed you in the wilderness. We could start there
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll just go for it.
Sure. My wilderness or my desert experience, it actually started when I had to step away from the ministry many years ago. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
I got so beat up, not so much by the members of the church. In fact, now that I think about it, it was never the members of the church. It was always leadership. I got so beat up by leadership in the church and denominational red tape. And I just had enough. And I had to make a decision. I mean, there's a lot of story behind that, but I had to make a decision. And I decided that the best thing to do would be to step away from the ministry. In fact, the Jesus painting that I created, that was a result of me stepping away from the ministry. I was so heartbroken. When I paint a portrait, I usually start with the eyes.
Wait, so
But when I
let's
painted
back
that,
up just slightly so that they know
sure.
you're an artist. You're a prophetic
Yes.
artist. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, just so they have a frame of
Yeah.
reference for that. So, okay.
Yes. Actually, in regards to prophetic art, when I got saved as a result of an open vision while driving on the freeway.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I've seen visions ever since.
Wow.
And when I first started, I thought you were supposed to write these things down. That was the protocol I was taught. So I wrote it all down. And then one day I saw someone painting something in the church and I asked what it was. They said, "Oh, that's prophetic art." I said, "What's prophetic art?" They said, "Oh, that's visions people see." I'm like, "Oh, that's a thing? You can do that?" And so I've been painting my visions ever since.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So
you
my
leave the
desert
church.
experience, it actually started as a result of leaving the church. The Jesus painting was the painting that I did as a reflection of, I would say that was the start of my desert experience, or what you call the wilderness experience. I stepped away for about 10 years. And at that time, I was just so beat up that I never left God, but I stepped away from the church. And so my prayer at that time was, "Lord, I don't have the strength to come find you. Would you please leave the 99 and come find me?"
Oh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And, even to this day, it was such a hard time in my life that I still feel that raw emotion, but it was such a rich time because I drew so close to his heart that around the 10-year mark, and I don't know why it took so long. My suspicion is that he always waits on us. We never have to wait on him. So I think that's what was going on. And around the 10-year mark, sure enough, we reconnected. He just ruined me again. I mean, I got ruined the day that I gave my life to the Lord, but I was a mess. And that's when he started to restore those things that I had lost. Now, granted, I did go through another season.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you only go through it once. No, this is a lifetime. And we go through different seasons throughout our lifetime. And about 4 years ago, 2017, I believe that's when the Thomas fire hit. My home burnt down.
Wow.
And I had just moved in. I was moving back into the area. I had just moved in on December 3rd, got everything moved in, all my paintings, my studio stuff. And December 4th, the fire broke out.
Wow.
And the home that I was in was 1 hour away from the epicenter. And so within 2 hours, my home was gone.
Wow.
Prior to that, my dad passed away suddenly. And there were just some other issues going on that it was a very hard time in my life. But because I had gone through my desert experience, I learned that I will never, no matter how bad it gets, I will never, ever walk away from him. That's a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And so I decided me and my mom decided the best thing for me to do would be to move in with her, and we could console each other, help build one another up. And at the time, I had no idea what his plan for me was. Now looking back, I could not have scheduled anything like it, because in this season that I've been here at my mom's, he has brought me through complete healing and restoration.
Wow.
You know, lots of forgiveness. So the season I went through where I was wounded by the church, that's all been healed.
Wow.
A lot of dad issues that I was dealing with, those have all been healed. I'm walking in freedom now. And then after he led me through that, he started to restore my calling.
Oh, wow.
And he reminded me that once he speaks, he never takes his word back. And that includes callings. When he speaks a calling into our life, he never takes it back. And so that's a part of the word he would use was, Scott, just be. Be. And it sounds so simple, but there are times when he speaks and he only has to speak one word, and there is so much packed into that one word. That's what I was getting from that phrase. Scott, just be.
And if you would have told me, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, like what that means, I think you're crazy. It's like, I have no idea what that means. But I personally know at least 5 people that are all in the wilderness, and God has spoken that exact same word. And he did for me as well. And when he told me, I'm like, because I'm such a doer. So I think part of it is breaking off performance-based activities and just performing for him and just being with him. And I didn't know how to do that. I was so busy doing for the Lord that I didn't know how to just be with him as a friend, as a bridegroom, as a just, all the different ways you could be with somebody. I didn't know how to do that. So I'd sit in my chair and I'd sit for 5 minutes and go, okay, I'm rocking. I'm just going, okay, I'm being. And then after like 2 minutes, I'm like, are we done yet? I'm being, are we done? Are we done being? Can I go do again? Can I go back to?
Right.
So So I want you to speak a little bit more about that, because that's the thing nobody's talking about, is that lesson. And for some of you that are in it, you'll understand it, but for some that are coming into it, they may not get it yet, because it's this different kind of concept, I guess. So
Right. I was a high school art teacher for 15 years. And
mm.
so I used to use my students as guinea pigs. In other words, I
Oh,
would study education. I would study the creative process. And one of the things that I learned as a teacher is that we're programmed to behave a certain way. And it's actually detrimental to a lot of creatives. And one of those pieces of baggage that we pick up is performance.
mm, yeah.
To get it right the first time. And if you don't get it right the first time, then you fail. And so we take that conditioning with us into our adulthood. And then we bring it into the church. And, we're taught, I was a senior pastor, and I've done this myself. We teach people how to study the Bible, and we teach them how to tithe and how to be a part of community and to be involved in ministry. And it's a lot of the doing.
Right.
And the Lord, he's just sitting off to the side, at least I believe he is. He's just sitting off to the side saying, I'd really like it if you just sit with me, to just be. So I believe that some of that, maybe more than some, it's conditioned into us and
Mm-hmm.
we're not aware of it. So when we bump into phrases like just be, when he wants to just sit with us or encourage us to give ourselves the grace to be who he created us to be and have nothing to do with performance,
Mm-hmm.
but just to be in a place of complete freedom and abandonment and allow that to happen
Mm-hmm.
without any
Mm-hmm.
expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it feels awkward.
Very
It,
awkward.
mm-hmm, it doesn't feel normal. But if we go through the scriptures, it's all there. It's all right there in the Bible. Every
Mm-hmm.
single time. You can take any pretty much any character. I went through the some of the bigger characters in the Bible, and I looked at their lives. And sure enough, in their DNA, the way God created them, he eventually led them to a place of being.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
didn't start that way, but they ended that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
So I
think,
think
yeah, go
I
ahead.
think part of being is listening.
Yeah.
And I try to avoid the word obey because it's been abused so
Yeah.
much,
I agree with that.
but I prefer the word respond. That's the word I usually teach in my art classes is respond. Um, there's a way to communicate. It's not just listening, it's hearing and listening. When
Mm-hmm.
Samuel was called by the Lord, he heard something,
Mm-hmm.
but he wasn't listening. And so we want to hear and listen, but hear, listen, and respond.
Oh, that's so good. That is so good. And I'm a teacher as well. I come from a teaching background for years.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
we give the test. You either
Mm-hmm.
get an A, B, C, or D. And if you
Mm-hmm.
didn't get enough right, then you fail. And then
Mm-hmm.
do you ever get that chance to retake that test?
Right.
Sometimes teachers will say yes, most of the time it's no. And that's
Right.
building in perfectionism. And I've
Mm-hmm.
seen that in the church a lot, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
and it's masked as
Mm-hmm.
excellence. How many times in the
Right.
church have you heard, oh, we're supposed to be excellent, and do things
Right.
with excellence? And I agree with that. But I think in the church, it has sometimes been masked as perfectionism, and you can't make a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to get it exactly right.
Right. I completely agree. Yeah. Uh, there's so much conditioning that goes on that I don't think we're aware of. And, I don't want it to sound like it's a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but we do need to be aware of how do we really grow in the Lord? Well, he keeps pointing to children.
Yeah.
to be honest with you.
Yeah.
He keeps pointing, and there are so many lessons I have learned from my own children and just by watching other children. We tend to forget that we're in a kingdom that teaches in a childlike manner. And in order to learn it, we have to be childlike.
Mhm.
And the same is true in learning how to be. Well, how do you learn how to be? You just have to become like a child. You really do.
Yeah. Yeah. That one took me a long time. I mean, you're a high level creative, if I could say it like
Hmm.
that. So was that an easy lesson for you? Or because for me, I'm so A plus personality of go, 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 that one took me years to really learn that one.
For me, it was an issue of trust.
Mm,
And I
mhm,
mean, that's something the Lord would remind me of. Do
mhm.
you trust me? Do you trust me? Put your trust in me.
Yeah.
Do you trust me? And that was a lesson that took me years to learn
Yeah.
how to rest in. I mean, even when he invites us to abide in him, the only way that you can really abide in him is to trust him, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah. That
Hmm.
I'm only laughing because he still tells me that, "Do you trust me? Do you trust me? Do you trust me?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Today I do. Today I do. I can give you today. Yes, I do today." And he
Yeah,
would always, I
yeah.
don't know for you, but for me, he'd like, "Trust is the key that unlocks the golden door. Trust is the key that unlocks the eternal door. Trust is the key." Like he would put all these little phrases together for me, and I'm like, gosh, okay, 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 I get it. I get it. You want me to trust you.
Yeah,
And it's something we just
yeah,
say
that was
flippantly,
huge.
like, oh, just trust God. But like to really trust him
Hmm.
even in your wilderness is to give up control
Yes,
and
yes,
lay down in a potentially dangerous field. Like if you're an animal,
yes.
like as
Hmm.
an analogy, just to lay down in a dangerous field and feel safe and have
Hmm.
peace and be okay. Because that
Right.
scripture says you prepare a table in the midst of my enemies.
Hmm.
Well, how do you do that? You do that by
Right.
trusting and having that peace.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. And see, that's where I realized that hearing, listening, and responding are so key.
Hmm.
When I put myself in this place of abandon, and it's a scary place, I thought I knew how to be abandoned to him.
Yeah.
But when I choose to move closer to him and I have to abandon even more, then in order for me to respond, I need to be able to hear and listen.
Hmm.
So I know what the next step is. Maybe the next step is to continue to rest. Maybe the next step is to maybe he gives me a vision for a new painting. But it always comes back to that place of trust. Do you trust me?
Hmm.
Do you trust me?
Hmm. No, I totally get that. I know a lot of people have dealt with church wounds. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's such a common
Mm-hmm.
factor in this whole thing. So, how did you get over your church wounds, or what process? I mean, I'm sure you didn't wake up and go, okay, it's all gone, Like, what was your process of walking through church wounds, especially from people that
Mm-hmm.
you looked up to and in leadership?
When I was at a crossroads during my desert experience, and I could go two different directions. The Lord was starting to um, the best way I can explain it is woo. When you woo
Mhm,
someone closer to you, you draw them. He was starting to woo my heart, and it felt really good. But because of my experience, I was a little leery. And that's actually where it started. And then it's interesting because when the Lord teaches us that when you want to discover the mysteries of heaven, when you want to hear my teaching, you need to come close. And if you come
mhm,
close, I'll open up the mystery to you. And so that was the crossroads, is that I realized that he was wooing me. and I started to respond to it. So that began the journey out of my desert experience. And in regards to the wounds, recently, like within the last couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem submitting under leadership, no problem whatsoever. The sad part is there's a lot of toxic leadership out there.
Oh, yeah.
And so one morning during my quiet time, I was talking to the Lord about it. And I clearly heard him say, Scott, do you need someone's permission to love someone else? I thought, oh my gosh, that's so good. I don't need a leader's permission to love someone in the marketplace, to have a conversation and just care about them. I don't need the pastor's blessing to post my paintings online. I don't need a ministry within a church. And that just rocked my world
Mm-hmm.
when he told me that I don't need someone's permission to do that. I don't need to sit underneath someone to do what he's already gifted me to do. He's already given me permission. So I've had conversations like that with the Lord when he has clarified, given me new perspective about where I fit in the body. I will tell you that I believe that a lot of people who step away from the church have stepped away from an organization. They haven't necessarily stepped away from God.
Mm-hmm.
Um, during my second degree, I actually studied the decline of the church in America. And that's one of the things that I discovered is that there's a lot of people who are leaving the church or the organization,
Mm-hmm.
but they never really leave God.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be close to him, but because of leadership in the church, they become wounded. They haven't necessarily become wounded because of God. Now, I understand that there are some who would say, well, God did this. I get that. I hear that.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look a little bit closer, I think what we would hear is that no, people failed them. God never failed them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's probably one of the first parts is getting real honest with ourselves. What really happened? Was it God or was it people? My
Mm.
suspicion is it was probably people.
Yeah.
And so if it was people, then let's revisit that and see what God says. I have a sticky note in front of me. It's right there. It says, what does God say about that?
That's so funny. That's so funny.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
even within Jesus's own camp, you have Peter who denied him, and you have Judas that betrayed him. One ended up coming back, one did not. Even within his own camp, he had to deal with, one of the 12 that he chose, or a couple of them that denied him as well. So, like, I feel like Jesus even went through the wounds of the people closer to him as well. So that's
Right.
why
Exactly.
he knows what we're going through with
Hmm.
that. So,
Yeah. The other thing that the Lord helped me to see is that to love through their brokenness.
mm,
You've heard the phrase broken people break people.
right. Or hurt people.
So
Yeah.
one of the things the Lord helped me hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
So one of the things the Lord helped me to see is that as he was pouring love into me, I started to see people different. And the love he was pouring into me, I couldn't help but love other people. And I became more aware of, oh, that's their brokenness.
Mm,
So once I started to see their brokenness, I could see through their brokenness to a point of love on the other side. It doesn't happen overnight because at first it had to start with me.
yeah.
He had to
Yeah.
do work in me.
Yeah.
And that would be the place I would suggest everyone starts is just turn everybody else off, turn the world off
Hmm.
and go inward. We always seem to think the answer is out there somewhere. I can tell you the answer is never out there. It's never out there. The answer is always in here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
start in here.
So the second one I want to talk about, because that's a big one, the church wounds is huge, huge, huge. The
Yeah.
second one that you mentioned earlier was the dad wounds. So how
Yeah.
did you get through the dad wounds and to the other side of your wilderness with the father wounds?
It started a long time ago, to be honest with you. I really believe emotional wounds take a lot longer to heal than physical wounds.
Mhm.
Um, and it's all tied to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So it all has to do with what's going on here
Mhm.
as well as in here. It started with me beginning to realize or beginning to become aware of my identity in Christ, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
You know, I'd read the Bible and he'd tell me that I have all spiritual gifts and that I'm a son and that I'm an heir. And then I'm reading this. And, you know, we all go through a point of denial at some point, but then the more I became aware of the reality of him in my life, I mean, I couldn't deny it because he was showing me pictures, showing me visions. It's like,
Yeah.
he's here. The more I became aware of that and his presence, oh my gosh, I love sitting in God's presence. So I'm becoming more aware of that, and I'm reading the truth of who I am and how he sees me.
Mhm.
I came to this point of realizing, you know, I've been a victim most of my life
Mhm.
and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And that's the sad thing, is that a lot of times we don't even know it.
Yeah.
And then I made the decision, I will no longer be a victim. I don't know what the alternative is, but
Right.
I do know that I will no longer be a victim. And when I made the decision to no longer be a victim, that's when I became even more aware of who I am in Christ, who who I am as a son, and I really liked it. And so I just began to feed off of that and sit with him. And you know, I paint with him every morning. I paint with the Lord every morning as a part
That's
of my
so
quiet
cool.
time. And the more I sat in that, I've been doing it for 10, 15 years.
Okay, I
It's just
want
the
that
coolest thing in the
anointing.
world.
I want that because I write with him every morning. I write with him and I'm like,
See?
I want the painting. I want the painting anointing. That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah. So the more he filled me with that, that's the best way I can explain it. It began to um, transform. It began to shift my thinking. It began to shift my heart. And it brought me to a point where, like others, I started to see the broken areas in my dad. And I saw him as a man. I mean, he wasn't this, I think sometimes we see our parents way up here
Yeah.
and they're just people doing the best that they can. And when I began to see him as a man, it brought him down here. And even though our relationship wasn't very close, it became manageable.
Mm, okay. So it seems like a reoccurring theme I'm seeing is as we get filled up and as we get more whole, that
Hmm.
the love comes within us and who we are, that we can see
Hmm.
past other people's brokenness, even in the wilderness,
Hmm.
and love on them, even though and love past their brokenness.
Hmm. Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. It
Wow.
it all goes back to this way. It has
Yeah.
to start
Yeah.
this way. It doesn't work any other way. So when we hear, you know, from the pulpit, you need to love your neighbor, you need to, you know, love, 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 love. Well, maybe we should preface that by, you need to be filled with God's love. Here, let's all get in God's love. Get filled up. How does that feel? Now stay there until you can't help it anymore, until you can't contain it anymore. Stay in that place. Because if we stay in that place, what will happen is that it will just come out. That's what Jesus talked about. Be filled. No,
Filled,
not
yeah.
just have a little taste. Be filled until you're overflowing. That's how we love others. But we have to stay under. And I like the analogy. It's not a water faucet of the Holy Spirit. It's a waterfall of the Holy Spirit
Oh, wow.
brought under.
Good
Yeah.
analogy. Love talking to a painter and an artist, because it's like you get all these beautiful word pictures. It's like I could just see all these paintings now. Well, the good news is that you're starting to shift. I think you've come over and you're starting to come in your promised land right now, right?
Oh my gosh. You have
So
no idea.
I want to know. That's the thing. We're here because the number one question that everybody asks that's in the wilderness is like, what's the promised land like? Give me some hope. So what's it been like, and what are you up to now that you feel like you've crossed over into that promised land for you?
Well, let me preface that by saying uh, I'm starting to become more aware. Again, I love that word, awareness.
Yeah.
I'm becoming more aware of the fact that we can have dreams and visions. We can have a desire to go there. But I can guarantee you that if you were to start there, you do not have the skill set and you do not have the heart to do there.
I totally 100% agree. Yeah.
That's why we are taken through seasons like this, is to prepare us for there.
Yeah.
Many times we don't like to be in pain. We'll avoid it. We'll self-medicate. We'll do whatever we can to get out of pain, to get away from it.
Yeah.
But the pain is required, just like a sculptor working on a piece of stone who chips away a little bit at a time. That's what the Lord's doing to us, not to hurt us, but to carve us, to shape us, to prepare us for there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I have begun my there. I am a few weeks, maybe a few months ago now. Lord had me sit with Joshua just before he crossed over.
In the Bible.
And I was encouraged to consecrate myself because I was about ready to cross over.
Wow.
This was before you and I talked.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I looked up that word, consecrate, and it's a powerful word.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do it too soon, it won't make any sense.
Yeah, because you're not ready. You're not ready. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So last year, I have been trying to build a website for 10 years. Oh my gosh, I've had such bad luck with website designers. Just not following through. Some have stolen money, others have just been flaky. And
Yeah.
last year, it was just, I started really praying about it. And I asked the Lord to please send me a web designer. This is now, keep in mind that my vision, I've been carrying my vision since 2004. And
Wow, that's a long
this
time.
burden. I have been carrying this and chipping away at it and doing whatever I can to pursue this vision, this passion that is, it's just, it feels like it's going to explode inside of me.
Yeah.
And the vision's simple. It's to support, nurture, and heal, to release the kingdom creative and prophetic artists. That's it.
I love it.
But there's
love
so
it.
much the church is lacking, is they aren't able to connect with, because the kingdom and prophetic artists aren't being released in the church.
Mm-hmm.
So in a nutshell, that's my vision. So
So
last year,
yeah, go ahead.
So
you're,
last year I was,
I keep interrupting you. Okay, so
It's
your
okay.
there is a prophetic
there,
art school.
yes.
Yay.
I have a vision to start a prophetic art school. Not just a here's a couple classes kind of art school, No, my prophetic art school is going to combine, or has, I've been teaching this in churches for a number of years. I combine um, technical art training. As an art teacher, I wrote my own curriculum and had all my curriculum approved by the University of California.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's the real deal.
Yeah.
It's taught at a college or art school level, so it's the real deal. So I want to bridge the technical training with the prophetic artist training
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I've done that is I've broken up the technical training into units, and in between each unit, there's a workshop that the student will take that teaches the prophetic artist side, how to hear God's voice. How do you respond? That's the big
Mm.
one. How do you
Mm-hmm.
respond? How
That's
do you
good.
hear? How do you listen? How do you respond? What do you respond with? So by the time the student completes the program,
Mm-hmm.
they complete the program as a prophetic artist. Today, many students, they go to um, a a class on how to flow in the spirit. They, using
Yeah.
art supplies. They attend a workshop. Let here paint what I paint, and they call that prophetic art. I don't call that prophetic art. Um, to me, I just merging two. Might as well say this. I'm just
Yeah. Yeah.
merging two
Yeah. Yeah.
two words: prophecy and art. That's all it is. Prophecy and art. So what's the definition of prophecy? John Wimber was my first mentor.
Mm-hmm.
So since that time, I have watched the prophetic movement grow and mature and flex and ebb and flow over all these years. And what I was taught and what I still hear is many in the spirit-filled charismatic camp believe that prophecy is foretelling or forthtelling.
Mm.
Biblical prophecy is foretelling or forthtelling. In other words, foretelling what God is going to do, or forthtelling, speaking forth what he is saying right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's prophecy.
Yeah.
Art's art. Art
Yeah.
is expression. Art is creative release. So prophetic art is foretelling or forthtelling, creatively expressing what God is saying.
That's so awesome. So that's your promised land. So you're coming into that
That's my
right
promised
now.
land. Yeah,
That
yeah.
is
So
amazing.
I have all my materials written. Last year, I started to pray, Lord, I need help finding a web designer. And guess who showed up 2 days after? 2 days after I started praying, you.
That's
And
so
it has
funny.
just opened this floodgate. I kid you not, it has opened this floodgate. My website is built.
Yay.
My there's a page on there for the school. In a few weeks, I'm starting to record my classes, and I'll be loading my classes, starting with orientation. The first few classes, I just want students to, how you do a school visit?
Oh,
You
yeah,
go to the
yeah, yeah,
campus and you
yeah.
poke around. Well, that's what I plan to do with the school. Is I'm going to load some classes and just allow people who are curious about the school to come
That's
in and go on a
perfect.
school tour.
That's so
Yeah.
perfect.
hmm
So how would you describe your promised land? Like this is your promised land.
hmm
And what would you say to people out there that are still, what's some advice that you would give them if they're still in it? They're still in the, in the trenches, so to speak, of the wilderness season. What
hmm
advice or what encouragement would you give them today?
I think first, as I shared earlier, figure out where you got your wounds.
Mm,
Did God really hurt you, or was it a person? And if
mm,
it was a person, is there a pattern in your life? Does it happen consistently? And with what type of personality?
mhm,
Take a look at that. And maybe it's a type of leader. Maybe they're looking for some kind of affirmation, but they're looking for affirmation from an individual who's toxic, and they're always drawn to that kind of person. So that would be the first place I'd start, is let's get real.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
are the wounds coming from?
Yeah.
Are they coming from God, or are they coming from a person? What kind of person are they coming from? Once you're aware of that, you regain your power, you regain control, because now you know who to avoid
Hmm.
and you know who to go to. From there, in that place, I would learn how to hear and listen. How do you hear God's voice? What is he really saying?
I really like how you honed in on hear, listen, and respond. I love
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
the three of those together. That was laid out so
Mm-hmm.
beautifully today. I think that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
So I've
because once you learn how to hear his voice
yeah,
and you really listen, then you respond, he can take you anywhere.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because if he says stay, rest, you'll rest. If he says go, go. And then
Mm-hmm.
none of that is performance based anymore. And
Nope.
you've given up
Mm-mm.
control of trying to
Right.
control the whole thing. You've just given
Right.
it all up. And it's like that is such an empty vessel that's he can mold and move. And if you make a mistake, you're okay because it's like, oh, guess I wasn't supposed to go there. And then you go there and it's not a big deal. And there's not
Right.
this
And
shame
that's
like,
how you
oh,
hear.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So what we want to
Mm-hmm.
do right now is we want to open it up. This is brand new for us. So if you've been watching, this has been so rich with Scott or today and his story. And we would love for you to write in the comments any questions that you have, and we'll go ahead and take them. Also, let us know where you're from. We would love to know the different countries that you're from or the different states that you're from in the United States. So we would open it up to questions right now if anybody's out there and wants to ask anything. And this has been so amazing, Scott.
Thank you.
It's just been so good. And thank you for your vulnerability. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
vulnerability is power, as they say.
It
And
is.
it's
Mm-hmm.
very it's just so cool that you're working with the creatives because a lot of times I feel like they've been pushed off a lot or put into a
Mm-hmm.
box. And it feels
Yes.
like you're, just opening that wide up.
Well, I
So,
grew up in an artist's home. My mom's a professional artist.
oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I grew up in that atmosphere, but at the same time, it wasn't valued by my dad. And so,
Mm,
I had the creative side here, but the you got to get a job over here.
yeah. Yeah.
So I've been there. I know what that feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. How can people reach you, especially if they want to find out more information or have friends that would be interested in your school?
Sure, they can go to my website, Scott with one T, Saunders, Saunders, scottsaunders.com, or they can find me on Facebook. Um, Look for Scott Saunders Studios on Facebook. I also have a
Okay.
Facebook group if they're interested. It's called Tribe.
Oh, fun.
Uh, yeah, so we just have some really cool times in Tribe. Um, a lot of people who, in fact, there's a couple people right now, they just broke out their art supplies and they're not really sure what to do, but they're just thriving. And I think for many creatives, we become performance oriented and we forget the product is a result of the process. The
Mhm.
product is always a result of the process. So
Yeah.
if you're more focused on the product than the process, the product is going to be hurting.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
agree
that's
with
where I'm
that.
encouraging these people to be, is stay in that process, in that playful state, in that childlike state.
And for those free courses that they can kind of get a preview of the school, that's on the website, right?
Mhm.
So
That'll be on the website. Yeah.
scottsaunders.com for that.
Hmm.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us on the Wilderness Season podcast and now live on Facebook. And until next time, we'll see you on the Wilderness Season podcast. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Wilderness Season podcast. If you need help navigating through your own wilderness season, Pick up a copy of my book, A Journey Out of the Wilderness, available on Amazon. Also, continue the conversation online with us by going to our Wilderness Season Facebook page. For resources and events, you can go to www.sherrylynnward.com. If you have enjoyed this show, please subscribe and review our podcast. Just remember, you're not alone.